Welcome to The Truth is Funny, Shift Happens with Colette Marie Steffen, inspiring shift on Transformation Talk Radio, gracing the airways every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific since 2013. And we're live on Facebook, providing nuggets of wisdom, tales from the vector, and energetic upgrades to lift you, shift you, and empower you to ride the wave of infinite potential. Do you have a problem? It is never what you think it is. Logical questions require creative solutions. Colette is a leading expert in the field of quantum energetic transformation. Learn to identify the usual energetic suspects and major accomplices to unveil another layer preventing you from living your authentic desires. You are a blank canvas. May as well paint a rainbow. We'd love to hear from you. Call 1-800-930-2819.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is so great to be with you this morning. 1 hour ahead, daylight savings, so more light, which is a great thing for the world right now, especially with everything that's going on. So yeah, daylight savings, we're springing forth, we're going into spring, new season, new bringing forth of fruit, and also just change. So we're going to dive right in. I'm Caleb Matthews with Encompassed by Dreams. Those of you who've been following along with my talks know that I just like to get right into it. So we're going to go right into it. For those of you that have never listened to my talks before, welcome. If you want to get caught up with my archives and The Truth is Funny on the Transformation Talk Radio, then I've got archives that are full of my teachings that we can connect to today. So we're going to go right into a deep dive into a very heavy, controversial topic. It's called the Privilege of Indulgence. I believe it's one of the most important messages of our time right now and the messages of our history. So let's go right into it. So let's take a look at the anthem of our culture. The anthem of our culture we hear over and over and over again. We are all in this together. It's that song I listen to at work when I'm on hold waiting for my customer or waiting for client care to get back to me for support. We are all in this together. We're all in this together. Just that phrase, we're all in this together. Slogans, we all hate sometimes, a lot of the times. They've been spoken primarily in the Western culture. Are we really in this together? I want to ask just a pointed question at the beginning. Are we really in this whole worldwide conundrum of our culture and society? Are we in this together? Do we understand what our ancestors, our grandparents' generation, our great-grandparents' generation, obviously the generations before, went through in the West, especially in history? Of course, through the world, but in the Western culture. When I say Western culture, I just don't mean Canada and the United States. I mean Western Europe, just Europe and Australia and New Zealand. Most of the first world countries I'm talking about. The ones that really were experiencing a different timetable than we've experienced right now. So let's put on our perspective glasses right now and go into a little time warp story, because I love using illustrations and stories and metaphors and pictorial language to get my message across. So for a small amount of perspective at this moment, imagine you were born in 1900 when you are 14 years old. World War I begins and ends on your 18th birthday with 22 million people are killed. Later in the year, a Spanish flu epidemic hits the planet and runs until you are 20. 50 million people die from it in those 2 short years, yet long years. When you're 29, the Great Depression begins. Unemployment hits 25%. Global GDP drops 27%. That runs until you are 33 years old. The country nearly collapses along with the world economic, system. When you turn 39, World War II starts. You aren't even over the hill yet. Wow. When you're 41 years old, the United States is fully pulled into World War II, into the conflict. Between your 39th and 45th birthday, 75 million people perish in the war, and the Holocaust kills 6 million people. Oof, deep. At 52, the Korean War starts and 5 million people perish. At 64 years old, the Vietnam War begins, and it doesn't end for many years. 4 million people die in that senseless, needless conflict, especially. All conflict and war is horrible, but that one was, I think most people could believe Vietnam was just like, okay, what are we doing here? Approaching your 62nd birthday, you have the Cuban Missile Crisis, a tipping point of the Cold War. As you turn, I think we can agree that we are not in this together. Even as you turn 75, the Vietnam War finally ends. And that was your life. Were they privileged? Were the people in that generation who lived through all of that, were they privileged? Would you, being where you are right now in 2022, want to trade your life in that time and jump into a time warp box and go all the way back and trade it for theirs? Their life for yours. I think we can agree today, as I was saying a few minutes ago, that today we are not all in this together. I'm sure if you were to look over across the world, especially what's happening over in Eastern Europe and Russia and the Ukraine, you wouldn't want to look at them and think that we are all in this together. When you aren't the one being bombed every day and running for your life from your country of your birth or sanctioned economically, both situations are terrible in their own regards. As always, there are the privileged elites versus everybody else in society, which takes me to my talk today. So you've got the elite bubble and you've got everybody else who's struggling to get by. So we're gonna go into that, this privilege of indulgence. This has exploded in a cycle, one after the other, in our world over the last few decades, specifically. People rising up for their rights. Since the year 2000, people have been rising up for rights and for freedom and for just causes and marching for all kinds of causes across the ages, but especially since the year 2000, with the rise in the collision course and the parallel tracks of social media alongside of what's going on in the last 20 years with all these movements. So let's go into this. There's been a lot of selective outrage, and by no means am I saying that any of these movements are negated in the fact that they began and happened in their infancy and their origin. But what I'm saying is that our media and mainstream media and just the goggles and the lens of the here and now, the earthly plane, has really selected each of them like a selective outrage. And to really, our media and our senses and our entire being has been bombarded with these movements towards the point where it just become too much, in my opinion. So selective outrage. Let's try tasting this fruit from the tree. We're going to talk about two trees today. There's a tree of knowledge of good and evil, and there's a tree of life. So this is a specific tree that all of this comes from, all of this information, this knowledge. One selective outrage after the other, as everyone demands supremacy. Everyone wants to be elite. A lot of people in these movements came from the right place and are in the right place, but there are powers, elite powers, that seek to corrupt these movements and place them in place as stumbling blocks, as mediators, media orators of a gap, a wall between us and our higher power, us and our destiny, us and really being able to function in our life. So who had it? Who had the elite supremacy in these groups? So there's the rich, there's the educated, there's the medical field, there's white, there's black, there's gender, rainbow movement, climate change, political left or right, famous Hollywood privilege, freedom, my body, my rights, native reconciliation, immigrant privilege. Like there's so much going down the list, and I want to be very careful, but I also want to be very firm as I'm talking about these points. None of these things in themselves are bad necessarily to speak up for these specific realms and areas, but when they become bloated with an elite sense of, I'm the supreme one. My movement is the supreme one. My movement is the only thing that matters. And if you're not fully on board with my movement and you're not elite in my circles, then we're going to cancel you. Cancel culture. So this is really the struggle in mankind. And since we're on The Truth is Funny, I thought I'd bring a little bit of humor into the situation because we've gone deep so far in the first 10 minutes. Yeah, Bugs Bunny. Yeah, this planet ain't big enough for the two of us.
Oh dear, you must be destroyed by a Ludium Pu-36 explosive space modulator.
Yeah, this planet ain't big enough for the two of us. That's my best Bugs Bunny and Marvin the Martian impersonation. A little Looney Tunes to spice up the morning. I love Looney Tunes growing up. So that's another side trail. But what's Bugs Bunny saying? What's Marvin the Martian trying to do by blowing him off his own planet? You know, there's always these battles between these characters in these shows. And so Bugs Bunny really had a truth to it, even then he's like, yeah, what's up, Doc? This planet ain't big enough for the two of us. He's got a truth to the statement. The world system as it is, with these elite systems and these elite movements, these movements that have been hijacked by elitism and really have been placed as idols in our society, each one of them, it's a cry and it's a defiance. It's a defiant elite eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and saying, this is the only movement that matters. This is the only thing that matters. This is the only indulgence that matters. We're going to feast on this movement 24/7, 7 days a week, all throughout the media, all throughout society, in political, economic, and financial and social realms until you bow to our movement. That's really what the elite seeks to do. They seek to corrupt everything and go into these places and say, all right, this is the movement that we're going to take and we're going to make you bow. We're going to be the media orders. We're going to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So you might be thinking, Caleb, what are you talking about, these examples of the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the examples of the tree of life? Well, our origins, I believe, since I believe in Jesus as my higher power, but also I believe that he restored humanity from falling short of God's glory to back to the Garden of Eden, back to our original blueprint where we were meant to come from, where man and woman walked with God in the garden when there was no sin, there was no darkness, there was no death, there was no war. There are many trees in the garden that he said you could eat from, including the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of life, and all the other trees. Every tree was good to eat from that filled these two with wisdom and understanding. And the tree of life brought life and sustenance, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a tree that they were not supposed to eat from in the garden. And we're going to get to that a little later on. But that's just to give you an understanding in case you're like, Caleb, what are you talking about? This tree of this and tree of that. So to stay on track, we've talked about the different realms, the different areas I listed in that list. You can go back into the teaching here and you can listen to that earlier on as I listed them. But I'll get back to that later on to recap. But we're going to move on. So I'm going to give you an example. In my city, in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada, where I live, there are many things that I love to do, including speaking to you on this show and over the airwaves, whatever country you're sitting there and from right now. But besides being a full-time worker at a wireless sales company for wireless and wireline products for telecommunications, I love to play tennis as one of my hobbies. So going after work or on my day off, I just love tennis. Tennis season has begun. The springtime outside is just so beautiful. And so over the last few years, I've really picked up the game of tennis. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom, for teaching me the game of tennis. She's been a tennis player since she was a teenager and took time off to raise 3 boys. Took 30 years off, and then now she's getting back into tennis as well, but she's still got the hand-eye coordination and the muscle memory to do it. So she taught me about 3 or 4 years back on how to play tennis. So with the tennis community, like any sports community, you're dealing with the elite crust again. There's the people at the top, not us, of course. We don't like that. I can't stand the elite social high mile club, status club, but we definitely rub up against them at our club. We're not in that circle. We're in the everybody else wants to enjoy and play with each other, but we are going to speak up when the elite privilege status tries to push down everybody else and say, this is what you have to do. We want to do things our way and not pay any personal cost. So at my local tennis club, myself and my parents, my family, because we're all involved, we deal with a very senior, wealthy, privileged senior aristocratic tennis society, high crust, high life privilege that really seeks to create a bubble around itself and say, we're the ones that get all the premium court time. We're the ones that are just going to leave our tennis balls on the court and let some maid pick them up for us. We're the ones that are going to make all the decisions on the best court time and the best evenings that we get to do our leagues. We're the ones that are going to be able to chit chat and socialize next to the playing area that you're not supposed to while everybody else is trying to play and their voices carry over the court. So these are things that we have pushed up against. That's just a small little example there in my current world in 2022 that we're dealing with every year is the privileged elites think, oh, who cares? We're the ones that are bankrolling this club. We're the ones that we can do what we want. No, you can't. Everybody is equal. Everybody should have an equal share at being able to enjoy and have fun. And that should be the way it should be like in real life. So one other example as well that I want to share with you is over the years, one of the things that I did a lot more pre-pandemic days, pre being able to travel most places and not have to worry about all these different red tape and border crossings and all the different rules countries have, is when I went to Africa in my teenage years, starting at the age of 17. Those of you who don't know, or this is recap and review, is that I went to Africa for 7 or 8 years in a row with my family, myself, my brothers. We all were involved in missionary work in East Africa and funding orphanages, Bible colleges, medical clinics in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania. East Africa is where I found my passion to speak, actually, to preach, to minister, to teach, to instruct people and lifting everyone's spirits just to a higher place in God and encountering God. And so being in that time in Africa when I was only 18 or 19 years old, very young, so 17 actually, 17, 18, 19, especially those initial years of stepping onto another planet. You want to talk about elites. I'm white skinned, stepping off the plane, being in a poor, impoverished African world. I definitely, in the eyes of the African people there, I was the elite. I was the upper crust. I was the Muzungu. I was the white man that had all the money and had all the influence, even though I didn't want to be treated that way. That's just the way it was, because a white person coming into their world from another world, another land, is like an alien stepping onto our planet, being like, okay, this person is just totally above my realm of class. And so when I was there, and I was at a different colleges, Bible colleges, churches, and conferences, usually they would introduce us to the people and then we'd sit down at the front. And that always made me uncomfortable, that we were sitting there like a prop, an item to be propped up, but there wasn't much you could do because that was their culture. So you had to go along with it. So that didn't, that bothered me, but it didn't defy my conscience. But some of the things that happened really defied my conscience. Usually what they would do is they'd pull like a bowl of water and they would offer to wash your hands. And so I would let them do that, but it was starting to get to the place where it was really weird. But the thing that was over the line for me was when there was this specific woman, and I'll never forget it, when I was in Uganda, and she brought the water up for us to wash our hands before we were to eat after our teaching was done. And she bowed to the ground thinking she was honoring me. It was her, her naivety. She's thinking she was honoring me. She bowed as if she was bowing down to a god, a statue, and grabbed my hands and was bowing to me with her eyes to the ground. And I was so bothered. And I turned to my mom. I said, this bothers me deeply. What do I do with this? And my mom whispered to me and she said, well, get down, with her at eye level and just say, I'm not a god either. And I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. So I got down with this lady, this young woman at eye level, eye to eye, face to face, grabbed her hands and had her look up at me, had the translator ask her politely to look up at me, looked in the eye. And I said to her in English with the translator translating in Swahili, saying, I'm only a man. I am not God. I am not a God. I'm not an idol. I'm not something to be worshipped. I'm here to encourage, inspire, and uplift the people with words of encouragement and preach and teach about Jesus and about God. But I'm not God. I'm not something to be worshipped. So I immediately refused. I refused that elite title. And that's not to puff up my own tires here, but I refused it. And so that's just something I've always resisted my whole life, is that elite status of one culture over the other. And that's a realm that God has a lot to say about. There is no elite in God's kingdom, in the kingdom of heaven. There is no elite in the kingdom of heaven. There is neither Greek nor Jew, neither male nor female, neither slave nor free. All are one, like it says in Galatians, in the kingdom of light, in the kingdom of heaven. There's only one tree. There's only one tree of life. There's only one mediator between God and man, and that is Christ. That's the gate. That's the living one. That's Yahweh. There is no media orators. There is no news station. There is no political leader. There is no voice. There is no personality that should stand between you and your higher power, between you and the creator, between you and God. That's really what this is about. This indulgence of elite systems, of elite movements, of elitism that's trying to choke the life out of people across this planet throughout history. It's always been the battle. It's been the main fight from the beginning of time in the Garden of Eden, all the way through our ancient history, through our ancestors' history more recently. And then what I was talking about in that example at the beginning, there is a fight to segregate between the elite status, the ones that hold all the cards and all the pieces on the chessboard, and everybody else in society who's just trying to make an honest living and work in life in their field and to feed their family and to love and enjoy life and do what they're called to do by God. So really, this leads me to the greatest mixture of elitism of all that Jesus came against in the New Testament, the union between political and religious powers. So as I was speaking about in Galatians, that blueprint that Jesus reveals, heaven's equal blueprint to Paul, neither Greek nor Jew, male nor female, all are one in the kingdom of God. Jesus modeled this and passed it on to the early church in the New Testament, in the Hebraic method, the one that I follow. But sadly, the church of today, people of today, people who claim to follow God today, people who claim to follow the Spirit, people who claim to follow their Creator, have not applied that freedom that Jesus brought to all people. Jesus was a blueprint. He was a model. He was somebody who preached another kingdom. That's where the organized church has fallen short and embraced the indulgent privileges of society. So it has infected the church as well. And for those of you who are nodding your heads right now, this is exactly true as well. It's not just the world that screwed it up, that has screwed it up and continues to screw it up. It's not just the political realm that has screwed it up. It's not just the Hollywood actors and actresses that have screwed it up. It's not just the rich Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and all the different high-rolling big business mega organizations that are gobbling all the other people up that have screwed it up, that there's corruption in those places. It's the church. It's the people that claim to be the gatekeepers between here and the kingdom of heaven. Jesus said, "Woe to you, you Pharisees! Woe to you, you gatekeepers! You stand at the gate and you deny people from entering in." That's elite. That's the elite bubble right there. That is the elite status that I'm talking about, that I'm putting my finger on. The elite indulgences that you saw in that picture that I've presented to this audience, to you, that you're seeing, of all the, that feast. I forget the name of it, but it's just the Feast of Beans, I think is what it is, the King of the Beans. And it's these kings and queens and these elite ones that are sitting at that table that's in the picture for this teaching today, the privilege of indulgence, of feasting and gorging on their food while others are just trying to push each other aside for the scraps that fall from the table. Like it's bad, but it's specifically bad within the political and religious, the marriage between the elite powers in the spiritual realm, when the religious leaders allow these political influences to come in and say, "Oh, we're going to require indulgences. We're going to require media orators. We're going to require this stumbling block in between you and God." So I'm going to go into this example, and then we're going to go into a break in about 5 minutes. I just go bam, 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 bam. We just keep on pushing this button. Privilege of indulgence, this elite system, this elite status, this high flyer club that is separated from the rest of the class. It seeks to separate itself through political powers, religious powers, economic powers, the powers that we see in the media today that is bombarding our news. It's the same MO. It's the same MO, that the evil one, the serpent of old, the one in the garden that was in that tree and that tricked Eve and Adam and Eve from eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that same serpent, that same power, that same mediator, that same twisting and lying is trying to influence itself in the church and also in political powers, economic powers, all these places. So let's go back. Let's go back in the timeline into the 1500s. You can see I'm enjoying this. I like making noises as well too. Truth is funny, but it's also deep. Martin Luther, Reformation, history in the 1500s. Martin Luther, the famous Martin Luther, where he nailed his 95 Theses to the gate at Wittenberg. That was a huge moment where he was just like, he came against the caste system, the elite crust of the Catholic Church. Religion of his day, he was a simple priest, but he just finally had enough when he saw the indulgences in Rome. The religion of his day required buying indulgences and buying freedom for yourself and for your deceased loved ones in purgatory. A coin in the coffer rings a soul from purgatory springs. Like that's what they believe. They believe you could buy your way out of hell. You could buy your way into eternity. And who would the money go to? To the elite, to the great bishops and the Catholics and the Catholic bishops and cardinals and the leaders and the priests that were in Rome, and you had to climb these stairs all the way to the top. And then as many stairs you climbed on your hands and knees, then you could free your loved one, old grandma and granny or grandpa from purgatory who had already died, or family member, child, daughter, son, brother, sister. The elite indulgent powers of the day were controlling the common person through religion as a weapon of fear and misinformation. Media at work here. We're talking about media again, guys. Woo-hoo, big revy here. Media at work here, and mediators, media orators. Martin Luther believed in salvation by faith alone. This simple, humble priest, he believed in salvation by faith alone, and also that the word of God, the word of heaven, could be understood by the common person. There's the level playing field. No mediators needed. Here is the same principles at work. We've got 3 minutes until the break. Here is the same principles at work. Politics married to church, religion, with the goal of one domination, one world order, one dominion, meaning one caste system, two-tiered society, bow and conform to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's the MO, to get humanity back to trading their heavenly birthright, our heavenly birthright of walking face to face with our Creator for really a lie and something that we already have in Christ, in our higher power, in the kingdom of light. We don't need the tree of knowledge of good and evil to be able to know what's going on in the world is screwed up. We don't need to go through mediators. We don't need these elite indulgences. In Martin Luther's day, they used mediators. The prince of the power of the air was at work through these religious elites, these powers, was at work through the political realms. And Martin Luther, it was amazing that he didn't lose his head or wasn't burned at the stake, because many people in his day were persecuted for their faith because they dared stand up against the elite. They dared stand up against the elite powers and the elite crust. But you and I, this is where we're getting into the good stuff now. You and I are created in the image of God, male and female, man and woman. We are created in the image of the Almighty God to be able to live our lives, no matter where you are, whether you're in North America right now and the bills are hard to pay because just prices have gone up in gas and you're just panicking and knowing what to do. My gosh, gas prices are so expensive. My gosh, it's becoming more expensive to pay off the mortgage in my house. My gosh, I lost my job because I didn't be coerced into taking a medical experiment that I had to be forced into. My gosh, I had a family member that died and I'm just facing with trauma. My gosh, I'm over in Europe right now and the sanctions are hitting me in Russia because, my gosh, I'm finding it hard to be able to even live in society. My gosh, I'm in the Ukraine right now and bombs are flying over my head and I don't know if I'm going to live tomorrow. My gosh. And there's these powers at play, the elites that are trying to control everything. And then there's us. Then there is the commission that God has given us to eat from the tree of life. So that's a lot of information. So we're at halfway point here. We're going to go into a break for a few moments, and then we're going to get back into wrapping up this privilege of indulgence, and then get into our privilege of the proper heavenly indulgence. So we are going to take a break, and I'll see you on the other side in a few minutes. All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're back from the break. Hopefully you got a little bit of something hot to drink or cool or just a little snack. Put your feet up and listen, join me on the rest of this journey. We are talking about the privilege of indulgence. We have gone through, really the differences between the elite and those who are trying to get by. The rest of us, most of the rest of us who just want to live in this planet and be able to follow Jesus and follow God, follow our higher power, follow the spirit of life, follow our creator to the best of our abilities, and really seek after light from the tree of life, but not from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And resisting media orators, those who try to tell us that we need to follow this elite extremes. And really, I was talking to Jessica on the break here, my amazing support here on Transformation Talk Radio, she's running all the switchboards and the systems and everything. But we really are living in a society of extremes. There's the elite extreme that we're talking about with Martin Luther and with everything we've spoken about so far in history, and then to the current day right now. The whole dividing line, the elite dividing line between elite extremism and personal choice is really, really big, like very big. Like, what happened to the days of this is the political party that I voted for, and even though I voted Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative or whatever, what happened to the days of, okay, this is my personal choice, my family's personal choice, but what happened to the days of, even though we voted differently, we can still live alongside of each other? Like, what happened to that without canceling each other from each other's life? The extreme of, okay, you're gone because you voted for a different party. What happened to the days of, oh, well, I chose to be injected, but you didn't choose to be injected. So therefore, I'm going to push you away from my life because you made a different medical choice than I did. Well, no, that's so wrong. Like, that is very wrong. Like, what happened to personal choice, individual conscience? What happened to that? Well, what happened to that is the media orators of mediation, that elite indulgence of, you're going to get on board with our movement. Otherwise, if you're not completely on board with, and then list all those movements that I listed, the rich, the wealthy, the educated, the white, the black, the native, the global warming, climate change. If you're not completely on board with that, my movement is the only movement that matters. Everything else has to bow to what I'm doing right now. You cannot have your own personality. You cannot have your own movement. You have to support my movement. Otherwise, I'm going to cancel you, and I'm going to encourage everybody to cancel you. That is wrong. That is the elite privilege that I'm talking about. Oh, like, I'm rich, and if you don't do things that I do at the club and the tennis club, and we want things done this way and that way, and you're going to be my maidservant like I'm at the resort. If you don't do things my way and jump when I snap and give me what I want for my court time, then I'm going to cancel you, and I'm going to make sure everybody knows not to play tennis with you because you're not bowing to my elite requests and my requirements on you, imposing that requirement. That's elitism. That is elitism. That is what Jesus came to destroy. He came to destroy the works of the devil. He came to restore mankind to Eden, to the tree of life, where you and I are given an invitation to eat from that tree of life, to resist the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That is the battle. That is the MO of the serpent, of the mediator, of the systems, of the elite powers, of the governments of this world. And I'm not with a tinfoil hat saying, woo, I'm not being tinfoil hat here. I'm telling you the truth. If you look through the history books, you look all throughout history from the dawn of time all the way to our current day, political powers, society powers, economic powers, religious powers, elite powers, these powers ultimately at their root seek to create their own bubble, their own ultimate world. My family and I, one of the things that we love to do, we absolutely love to do, is we love to watch National Geographic and about the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. It's fascinating when they go through these places and they find artifacts from another civilization, and they find tombs with just hieroglyphs and things that are in pristine condition, and they find mummies, and they find just all these different treasures. It's awesome. It's really cool to learn from that. But we look back into these days and we notice that I'm getting excited here. The ultimate goal of these pharaohs, these elite powers, because it was the pharaohs, they were the living god, the living deities in Egypt. They sought to be gods in life, and they sought to be gods in the afterlife. That was their requirement of the people, is that they bowed to their elite agenda of, I want you to create me a pyramid that will last eternity. I want you to bury me with all my treasures so that I'll always be able to navigate myself through eternity. It's always a striving. It's always requiring slavery of everybody else to support the elite vision of support my pyramid, support my mediator, support my mediation so that I can be known as your mediator. Worship me because I control the power. Worship me because I want to have you do all the work, but I want to enjoy the benefits. And that's completely delusional. Even though we love to enjoy these artifacts and these landmarks and these places, and it's an important thing in history to learn, but at the very root of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt is a goal to be a god in life, and a goal to be a god in the afterlife, a goal to rule above in an elite crust over the people, to keep people bound in fear and intimidation, to keep people bound to that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Media orators, that's what mediation is. Media, mainstream media, politicians bought off by journalists, media, newscasters create their own false, indulgent elite reality, their own temples, their own pyramids, their own indulgences as elite indulgences. Adam and Eve, they were tricked by media, the media order, as I was talking about, the serpent, that crafty old serpent in the Garden of Eden in Genesis, to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They were tricked. Why did they were told that if they ate from that tree, they would become like God. They would know good and evil. Well, why would they need that when they already were walking with God and they were eating from the tree of life? That's the lie. That's the lie, is that there's always this moving target that the elites paint out in society. If you just do this, then you're going to be one of us. If you just conform to this agenda, then you're going to be one of us. If you just make this decision, then you're going to be one of us. If you just vote this way, you're going to be one of us. If you just make this medical decision that we're going to coerce you into, you're going to be one of us. If you just believe the narrative that this is really what these wars over in Eastern Europe are about, then you're going to be one of us. If you're just going to believe this thing about these, the way that the markets work and the way that currency works, then you're going to be one of us. It's a battle for our mind and our will, just like in the Matrix. Morpheus said to Neo, one of the great scenes of the Matrix, great movie, by the way, if you haven't watched it. And Neo's looking over the abyss, and he just doesn't believe that he can jump from one building to the next. But Morpheus, his mentor, his spirit guide, so to speak, to the creator, he says, you have to let it all go, Neo. Fear, doubt, and disbelief. Free your mind. And then he just jumps. So you have to free your mind. We can't get caught up in the systems of the world. Our mind cannot be set on the earthly plane. Our mind needs to be set above, according to Colossians 3. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. Set our mind on things above. This earth and its cares and its pyramids and its indulgences and its temples and its elite powers are all passing away. This is all going to turn to ash and dust, as dusty and ashy as the remains that have been found in the pyramids of ancient Egypt. Mediators like the pharaohs, like the religious powers of the popes and the priests and the just the cardinals, like in Martin Luther's day, and just the elite powers in government and politics and the rich powers of our day. They want us to be slaves. They want us to support their vision. Support my vision. Oh, just get on board. Just trust us. Trust us. Am I saying that God can't influence and he can't use powers, government powers, political powers, and economic powers for good? No, I'm not. But what I'm saying is we can't put our trust in them. We cannot put our trust in mediators, media orators. We can't put our trust in in CNN. We can't put our trust in NBC. We can't put our trust in Fox News. We can't put our trust in Al Jazeera Network. We can't put our trust in the BBC Europe. We can't put our trust in CTV or CBC News. We can't put our trust in Fox News. We can't put our trust in any of these things. We have to put our trust in Yahweh, in the living God, in the tree of life, the tree that is in eternity, that is in Eden, that's still there to this day, thousands of years later, that tree that goes all the way up Jacob's ladder and reaches all the way to the throne zone, the throne room, where God is sitting, presiding over creation, where the laws of God are going out as fast as the speed and the sound of light, where the angels come to and fro that come from the throne of God, that stand in the presence of God. That's it. And mediators want us to be slaves to keep us on the earth, to keep our focus on the earth, the elite indulgence of the earth, indulge in the earthly, indulge in the earthly agenda. But it's always about the elite versus slaves to keep us dependent upon them. This is what we are talking about, our two-tiered system, the two-tiered system of society between us and the elites. So are we still in this together? No, we are not. They are at the top and we are on the bottom. This is not God's way. He came to level the playing field. Jesus said to his disciples, as we wrap up in our last 10 minutes, the last thing he said on earth before he ascended into heaven, after setting the earth straight, after 2,000 years of elitism and slavery, after his death and resurrection, Jesus' final commission was to restore their sovereignty in Eden. I no longer call you slaves. I'm going to repeat that. Jesus' final commission was to restore their sovereignty in Eden. I no longer call you slaves. I call you friends. He restored us from mediation to union. Mediation to union. So Daniel and his free friends, I'm going to go back into before Jesus' time. I've talked about Daniel before, and I think in some of my teachings about dream interpretation early on in some of the archives. Daniel's three friends. This is in BC, 597 BC. Four boys actually, were picked up from Israel in the Israeli captivity when Babylon invaded Israel. And this was way before Jesus' time, way before the New Testament, way before any of that stuff. 597 BC, when Babylon invaded Israel, they were higher above others in society. They soon were. Daniel and his friends, they realized that they were in a foreign land when they were taken to captivity. They were princes. They were Israeli princes. They were the high crust, the elite of Israel, and they were chosen princes that were taken into Babylon, into a foreign land and culture. They could have tossed their commitment to Yahweh away and their values and morals for the elite status of Babylon, because Nebuchadnezzar recognized that they were elite and brought them into the elite service of his court because he saw that they were elite. Because that's what Babylon did. That's what Nebuchadnezzar would do. And he would conquer nations. Instead of killing all their people, he would capture the choice princes and he would take them into his own service. And then he would try to brainwash them into his elite agenda and have them remove their belief systems and have them embrace a Babylonian way. And that is how he would impose him really apostolizing Israel. Really just taking people and just commissioning them into his service and then sending them back to their land to rule as his puppet ministers. That was really his plan. But these boys, they refused the elite status and privilege of Babylon. They refused the tree of life. They refused the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And they chose committed to that Eden, that tree of life, even if it cost them their lives. So they could have tossed away their commitment to Yahweh, and they could have tossed away their values and morals and principles in Babylon because they were invited to the elite status. It was all given to them. But they said no, and they put their lives in danger. They refused to bow to the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had constructed. They refused to eat the food that was dedicated to the idols of Marduk and the idols of Babylon and the idols that defied their conscience because they were deviating from the path of light, from the path of the Spirit of Yahweh, from the Spirit of God, from Christ. So that was what they did. And we have to do that. We have to refuse these elite indulgences and indulge instead in the tree of life. And the choice is simple. We've been talking about the whole time between the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Choice foods. One is to know the world knowledge and to be wise in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the other is the tree of life. So they were offered indulgence and privilege, just like those in Martin Luther's day, just like those in our day, and just like Daniel in Daniel's day as well. All these different eras, we're going to roll it back into one now. And we're offered either to get on board with the world elite indulgence systems or get on board with heaven's indulgences. So we respectfully disagree. We can, disagree with what's going on, but we can do it respectfully in our society today, just like Daniel and his friends did, just like Martin Luther did, just like people in history did, that offer an alternate solution. So when we indulge in the tree of life, we have a natural and supernatural immunity to the elite indulgences of our day. So let me just say that again. When we eat from the tree of life instead of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, we have a natural and supernatural immunity to the elite indulgence of the day. We use our free will, sovereign control over ourselves, and not giving up our minds, our spirit, and our body to the elite systems. We have to stand our ground for that. Adam and Eve, they bit into the apple, and they were already in union with God, but they bought into a lie from the media orator of the day, the serpent of old, which has sought to move throughout history, throughout the elites, throughout Martin Luther's day, throughout Daniel's day, and ultimately through Jesus' day, and now in our day. That it's the same battle. It's the same elite indulgence battle between good and evil. That's the same battle. And that is what the media is trying to do today. It's trying to separate us from Eden, this elite indulgence, the privilege of indulgence, this privilege, all these privilege movements. They're trying to distract us from our inheritance and our birthright in Eden. In Eden, the mediators, the elite indulgence, the knowledge that gives power. That's their hanging fruit, hanging carrot. And this is a life that is separate from the tree of life, from Eden and from God, the one that Jesus restored us to. Mankind fell short of the glory of God in Eden through Adam and Eve, but Jesus restored us. He restored us to the tree of life, past all these elite powers, these political and religious powers. So, since I don't see anything in that chat there that would say any burning questions or things that you want here in the end, I want to pray for you. I want to minister to your spirit right now. Whether you're in North America, whether you're down under in Australia and New Zealand, whether you're in France and England, Germany, Africa, South America, Mexico, any area of the world, Eastern Europe, especially, to my brothers and sisters in Ukraine and Russia, because that's the thing. I want to say this at the end before I get into my prayer. Let's not believe that narrative either, guys, that, all of Russia is evil. No, we have some evil people at the top that are definitely inflicting pain, suffering, and wrongness on people of Ukraine and people of the world with these bombings and these attacks. But that doesn't make the people, everyone in Russia, a bad person, that we cancel them out of their lives. So I want to put that across the airways. If we learned anything today, let's not fall into that trap of canceling the Russian people. The citizens there are suffering as well too. I've got friends over in Russia that they're getting hit hard with economic sanctions. And Ukraine, I've got Ukrainian friends in the modeling industry that I know that many of their families and people that they're involved with, the people who are running for their lives, that have lost people that they know through the bombings and through the attacks. That is also wrong. So the people are the ones that suffer when there's this battle of elites, these battle of demigods trying to control. You have the Eastern powers and you've got the Western powers, and they're all jockeying for control, elite control. And we want to resist that. We have to look past that narrative and look into the multiple perspective advantage and live our life and not be caught into this us and them mentality. So let's pray. Let's pray, because we are to indulge in the tree of life. That is the ultimate indulgence, not the elite indulgence of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So Father, Spirit of God, Spirit of revelation, that we invite the Kadosh Ruach Yah, the holy breath of God, to open the eyes of understanding of everyone listening, everywhere across the world right now, to rise to a height of perspective, to see the open door of heavenly indulgences, to walk through the door of Christ. Do you know that no matter what culture, nationality, gender, skin color, social status, health status, political party, or tribe you come from, all are welcome to eat from the tree of life, which is Christ? That looks like Eden. Thank you, Father. that you walk with us in the cool of the day, and that we can hear the voices of the angels of wisdom and knowledge in the heart of God, to know the secrets of the kingdom of light, love, health, and complete assurance that God is our friend. He's your friend. He's my friend. To share the bounty of the universe and the goodness where everyone is welcome, where there is no hatred, no war, no mediator, no fear narrative. So today, friends, we invite all of us into that realm of God. God, I pray all of us come into that realm of that elite indulgence of the tree of life, not the elite worldly indulgence, but we are brought into your elite realm, We're all equal to eat from the tree of life, not under a tyrant family member, indulgence, religious powers, or elite political leaders, or these dimensions of the world that are trying to push us down. But through Jesus, we can go up that ladder into Eden and indulge in the heart of eternity and in pure light, that we are known, feel, and loved. So may your spirit sense the love that God has for us right now, that this is a reality. The spirit is closer than the air we breathe and the skin. It's all about changing our perspective. There is a natural world and there's a spiritual world. It's about changing our perspective. This domination will pass. This world and its cares are fading away, but we are pilgrims and citizens from another world, a heavenly one. God sees you. God sees you. God sees you. You are precious. Stop looking at the tree of knowledge of good and evil and start looking at the tree of life where hope is. I pray this reality, the tree of life. The indulgences we eat are supernatural indulgences that free us when we welcome Jesus Christ in. He will make a table for you in the presence of your enemies, a feast. Invite him in. Invite the Spirit of God in. Invite the Spirit of revelation in to break through your world, through the corruption, through the elite powers, through the darkness, into the supernatural world. So I bless you with freedom of the tree of life, to indulge in the tree of life and not indulge in that tree of knowledge and that media order. Turn it off and turn on the tree of life and invite Jesus Christ to become your indulgence. Amen. So thank you. Thank you for joining me today and tuning in from where you are in the world. And I bid you shalom and peace. And that's it for me. I'm signing off. So thank you for today.
You've been listening to The Truth is Funny, Shift Happens, with Colette Marie Steffen, gracing the airwaves every Wednesdays at 8 a.m. Pacific since 2013. And we're live on Facebook, providing nuggets of wisdom from her book, The Truth is Funny, and 3-card consultations from Tales of the Vector Oracle. Colette has poured 14 years of energetic upgrades into this deck, and we can all predict what will happen if you continue in your wanton ways. Check out how you can become an official modern-day Dragon Sayer by visiting thetruthisfunny.com. Energetic upgrades to lift you, shift you, and power you to ride the wave of infinite potential. You are a blank canvas. May as well paint a rainbow. We'd love to hear from you. Call in next week. 1-800-930-2819.